Good stuff. What about when it comes to ammunition? Why has there been such a run on ammunition? Why is it that it's so hard, and that the party we just had at the ATF party, it was a bit more expensive to break those clay pigeons because ammo is so much more expensive? Why? Everything else is cheaper right now.
Well, Barack Obama, before being elected president, had proposed a 500% increase on the tax, in the federal tax on firearms, a 500% increase on the federal tax on ammunition, and had also proposed, when he was running for Congress the first time, outlawing any gun store within 5 miles of a school or park. So you can say you're for the Second Amendment, but if you follow his five-mile ban, then there wouldn't be any gun stores anywhere within the inhabited United States. You know, maybe you could find somebody who had a
on Long's
store
Peak, you could probably put one up there.
Yeah, except it's public land.
That's a good point.
But maybe
some
you can,
farmland in the middle of Kansas.
Exactly. Although there are restrictions on interstate sales. But you're right. You might be able to find some store. You could imagine a store in the tornado shelter of somebody's farmhouse, perhaps. Other than that, it'd be just about impossible to buy firearms. So when you have a guy who's been elected president who's said these things and has never said, "Oh, that was my mistake. I was just being very South Side Chicago. You know, now that I've campaigned nationally, I have a more balanced view." He's never repudiated any of these extremist positions he's taken on the issue. So understandably, people are trying to buy firearms and ammunition while they still can.
Has ATF changed? Now, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is in the Department of Commerce, which has
it was in Treasury.
Treasury.
It's now part of Department of Justice.
Now, why it used to, forever it's been in Treasury, and I haven't quite ever figured out why it was in Treasury.
Originally, the federal power, when the federal government was more into obeying the Constitution, at least some of the time, it was understood that Congress didn't have the authority to make laws on any subject it chooses, and so congressional authority over firearms was exercised by the tax power, which clearly is something that can reach down into purely interstate activity. So, for example, when Congress wanted to control machine guns in the National Firearms Act of 1934, the Roosevelt administration explained that banning machine guns would violate the Second Amendment, but they explained to Congress that we can tax them, and to get the tax, you have to own a machine gun. You have to pay a $200 registration tax and fill out a lot of federal paperwork, and now get a letter of permission from your local permission form from your local police chief or sheriff.
It was always been in Treasury
because it was a tax power that was used for federal gun control.
Now it's in
Justice.
Justice. ¿Por qué?
Because they sort of got over the idea that Congress has only limited authority on various things, and they discovered that whenever they say the words interstate commerce, that becomes a magic formula by which Congress can control anything it wants, because, you know, as they say in the Pocahontas movie, we're all connected to each other and everything affects everything else. So they can pass, for example, in the drug context, a ban on a woman in California, Oakland, who needs marijuana for her deadly illness, cultivates her own marijuana, never engages in any commercial transaction, and the Supreme Court in Raich versus Gonzalez upheld the federal government, saying even though it's legal in California, you're complying with all the California laws, we can prohibit your personal cultivation of this medicine for your own non-commercial use, because Congress has the power to regulate commerce among the several states, according to the Constitution, and somehow your personal cultivation of marijuana affects the
price.
It affects the interstate. Exactly.
All right. Let's talk. We've only got a few minutes left. Let's talk about Eric Holder. Now, we've got a new Attorney General. He is now in charge of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And while we did invite him to our Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms party, he was a no-show. He's not been a big lover of the Second Amendment.
No, he was the #2 guy under Janet Reno, who was by far the most extremist anti-gun Attorney General of all time. And he had, when the case of District of Columbia versus Heller was before the Supreme Court, he joined former Attorney Janet Reno in an amicus brief telling the Supreme Court that there is no Second Amendment right. He didn't even take the position that, oh, there's a small individual right which only applies if you're actually in the militia. He said there's no right at all for individuals. It's purely a state government right. That was a view rejected 9-0 by the Supreme Court. But it sort of shows how extreme he was, that he's way beyond what even Justice Stevens thought was a plausible interpretation of the Second Amendment.
As Attorney General, what is it that he has power to do? I mean, for instance, if you have your firearms license, your FFL,
Federal Firearms
License, you can sell guns. And it used to be those were rather easy to get. You fill out the forms, you go through the background check, and you can become a licensed firearm dealer, which means you can buy from a wholesaler and sell it at a retail shop. You can even sell it at your home if you wished, but you need to follow all the laws, you need to fill out all the papers, you need to work with the Bureau. That changed a lot under Bill Clinton, and those numbers got cold. What's going to happen under
The Clinton administration and really the Bush administration wasn't much better on this. Ultimately drove about 70% of licensed firearms dealers out of business. And what this was
how'd they do that?
Administrative hassle, basically. And what
because if you're the kind of guy that sells 2 or 3 guns a month, and this is a sideline business you make a little extra money on, you don't want to go through
Well, and the important
putting
thing,
through your inventory, doing all this other paperwork that you need to make the feds happy.
well, and of course you have to do the paperwork like a store that sells 100 guns a week in terms of filling out the federal registration forms and collecting the federal excise tax, all that. But it was more like an abuse of power in the renewal process by agents hassling people trying to renew their licenses. And it was a bad thing for gun safety because these what they're called kitchen table dealers, small businessmen who sell just a few guns out of a home store. They're the ones who could spend more time with a customer who they knew personally and help them pick out the most appropriate and safest gun.
All right. So what's going to happen? We've only got a minute or 2 left. What should our worries be? Now, for gunnies out there, I know anti-gunnies out there are probably thinking, well, it's time to get on there. We've got our man who doesn't like guns. We've got a Congress that doesn't like guns. Now's the time. I'm thinking that's not going to happen. I'm looking for administrative things that are going to make it more difficult for people to own and bear arms.
We'll see lots more administrative things. We will see when the good crisis, as Rahm Emanuel puts it, come along. They'll use that, and we'll see the appointments to the federal court. Probably future Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor has a strongly anti-Second Amendment record on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Heller was a 5-4 case. Change one judge of that 5 with a future Obama appointment, and then you'll have a Supreme Court which at best will define the Second Amendment so narrowly that even though they'll continue to pay lip service to the existence of the right, they'll find the right permits all kinds of abusive
Most
bans.
important thing people can do if they want to protect their Second Amendment rights is do what?
Stay politically active and stay well informed and go to the Independence Institute website.
That's independenceinstitute.org. Dave, thank you. Men of the world, I'm sorry I lost the battle of the sexes. Next year, I promise. Listen for me late nights on 850 KOA, and by all means, tell a friend. We'll see you next week.
You jab, bamboozle, nuke and noozle, bippity bop, she called. You jab, bamboozle, nuke and noozle, bippity bop, she called. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off. The day I met you, wish I'd been in Paris. A million miles at sea.